بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وسلم على سيدنا محمد خاتم الأنبياء والمرسلين. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Like, subscribe, leave a comment, please. Very helpful. Talking about textual analysis here on Priming the Primer, lesson number 20. Wow, subhanAllah, 20 lessons in, man. And we're talking about classifications of speech. Now we want to talk about, after talking about structure, second thing that we want to talk about is function and meaning. So, for example, we have something called amr, command, which is a verb. فَصَلِّ. Then you must pray لِرَبِّكَ, to your Lord, وَانْحَرْ, and slaughter. The word sacrifice, I have a problem being translated this like this. I remember early on in my Islam, I thought this was like jihad al-nafs, jihad al-ibadah, like sacrifice and work hard. But actually what it means is to literally slaughter. وَانْحَرْ. So pray and slaughter an animal. The point here is salli and anhar. These are verbs that are commands. And they, in usul al-fiqh, they generally indicate obligation. The default is obligation unless there are some contextual clues to suggest otherwise. We'll talk about that in the future. It's coming. Right? So if the Prophet said, you're not allowed to drink while you're standing, then someone saw him drinking while I was standing, we understand it to be not an absolute prohibition. Right? فَصَلِّ لِرَبِّكَ وَانْحَرْ أَمْرٍ. They have an axiom. الْأَمْرُ يُفِيدُ وُجُوبٍ. That a command, its default is fard. Number 2, prohibition. A request to refrain from an action. But we want to say this is a definitive request, right? Just say definitive, man. Just put a D here so you can remember. Definitive. Definitive means absolute request. Non-negotiable. All right? La yaskharu. Here, yaskharu has a sukun because that la is a la of prohibition. It's not let not a people ridicule. It is not allowed for people to ridicule other people. This translation is beat, man, with all respect. Generally indicates forbidden status. So we said the default of a command is fard, the default of a prohibition is haram, unless there's contextual clues to weaken the intensity of either one. From wajib or fard to recommended or permissible. From prohibited to makruh. You're going to learn all this in the future. Inshallah. La yaskhar qawmun min qawmin. Surah Al-Hujurat. The second, get rid of that for you guys, is a statement. خبر. Say خبر ما يحتمل الصدق والتصديق والتكذيب. A khabar is what can accept being authorized or denied. Tasdiq or takdhib from sidq and kadhib. So it's information that can be true or false. So najaha al-mujtahidu, not always. So it may indicate a factual statement or imply a legal ruling indirectly. We'll talk about that in the future. That's why it's here. It could dalalatul ima imply a legal ruling. Istikhbar, requesting khabar, like istighfar, requesting forgiveness here. Istikhbar, requesting news. Istikhbas, requesting bread. An example, hal ja'a Muhammadun? Did Muhammad come? A person? Maybe rhetorical indicate emphasis rather than seeking information, but sometimes it has a rhetorical usage in usul al-fiqh to emphasize something. A wish, desiring something difficult or impossible. If only I had wealth to perform Hajj. أتمنى أن لي مال كاف يكفيني للحج. I wish I had sufficient wealth to make Hajj. That would suffice me for Hajj. I wish. Because I could get it, but I have to work hard. These kind of things generally do not establish legal rulings. Called insha. Suggestion, arad, gentle request or offer. لا تنزل ألا تنزل عندنا. Will you not stay with us? You're not demanding it. You're nice. Ala is a way of saying it nicely. usually indicates a recommendation, sunnah, or irshad, guidance, not fard. An oath. Wallahi, la'abuwanna biwaliday, or biwaliday. By Allah, I will be dutiful to my parents. This creates a legal obligation through swearing, depending on the context. These classifications are not merely linguistic exercises, but have profound implications for deriving legal rulings. That's why we're talking about it. The reason for this, and the reason that scholars of usul al-fiqh are going to talk about this, that they're deriving legal rulings based on these meanings and their intensity. And inshallah, when you study usul al-fiqh, like for example, our school will train you on this. You train, you practice. Commands, these are the axioms I was alluding to earlier. You want to try to remember these. Commands generally indicate obligation, though context may suggest recommendation or permissibility. Prohibitions generally indicate forbidden status, though context may suggest dislike. Statements may describe reality or establish normative principles. Understanding these distinctions is essential to proper interpretation of the Quran and Sunnah. Now here's a knowledge check for you. What are the three essential components of usul al-fiqh according to classical scholars? You look at it and you write it in the comments box below. Which of the following is not a valid structure for speech according to the text? 2 nouns, a noun and a verb, 2 particles, a noun and a particle. I want to see your answers. Classify each of the following statements according to both structure and function. This is something students at our school will have to do on the website. I think on YouTube it's going to be hard for people. So you're looking at these texts, you're classifying each one. It's a prohibition, it's a statement, it's a inquiry, 2 nouns, noun and a verb, verb and a particle, noun and a particle, blah, blah, blah. If you don't know, don't worry about it. If you know, then answer. Read the following passage from Al-Ghazali. Know that when you understand the usuli scholar examines the ways religious evidence indicates legal rulings, it becomes clear that the objective is to understand how to derive rulings from evidence. Therefore, one must examine the rulings, then the evidence and its types, then the methods of deriving rulings from evidence, and finally the characteristics of the one qualified to derive rulings. Here you see the definition of usul al-fiqh that Baydawi, who comes after Al-Ghazali, adopts, but here you see the foundations that they're both Shafi. So know that when you understand the usul, that the usuli scholar examines what? The ways religious evidence indicate rulings, it becomes clear that the objective is to understand fiqh, how to derive or ijtihad rulings from evidence. Therefore, one must examine the rulings, then the evidence and its types, ma'rifatul dila al-fiqh ijmaliyan, then the methods of deriving evidences, and finally the characteristics of the one qualified to derive the rulings. Those 3 things that Baydawi defines usul al-fiqh, what you find here, Al-Ghazali mentions in Al-Mustasfat. For rulings are fruit, and each fruit has a description and reality in itself, a source, a harvester, and a method of harvesting. Allahu Akbar. Explain how the classification of speech relates to the process deriving legal rulings as described by the Imam. Some critical thinking. Why is understanding the structure and function of speech important for deriving legal rulings from religious texts? Consider the threefold nature of usul al-fiqh, al-Baydawi's definition. How does each component contribute to proper legal derivation? Compare and contrast the implications of command versus statement in legal text. How does a jurist approach each differently? For our next lesson, what I want you to think about is memorize the text from al-Waraqat if you can. I want you to be able, when we're finished with the next lesson, to define something called haqiqa, to understand something called literal linguistic meaning, the customary literal meaning, and the legal literal meaning. So haqiqa means literal, haqiqa lughawiyya, language, urfiyya, custom, shar'iyya. Then you need to be able to talk about majaz, the figurative, and research the relationship between the two. Here are some. So you need that for next lesson, right? Here's the additional resources we provided for you to utilize, and some key codes that you can take from some of the different ulama. If you're a Swiss student, I'll be looking for this to be done in your assignment folder. If you're not a Swiss student, no problem. If you can subscribe, go here, man, hook us up, work with us, help us grow. you're enjoying this, support that type of scholarship that you enjoy and access to information. If not, no big deal. Try to answer within the comments on YouTube. Barakallahu fikum. Wa sallallahu wa sallam ala